All right, this is take one, and we're only doing one take on this because I don't want to do it all over again. Okay. So hello YouTube. Long time no see. It's been a grip since I had my camera on for any content, and this is not a Fortnite upload or a stream upload. But it's an assignment for school. This is going to be my first and probably only podcast episode on this channel. Don't have a name for podcast channel. Um, we're just gonna do the assignment. so, um, this podcast episode is going to be about ChatGPT and its effects on children and teens, mostly teens, since teenagers, adolescents between the age of about like 13 to 18 have been the most highlighted demographic in media lately, and how they're using it and how it's affecting them. So I'm just going to go through a couple little topic points that I organized for this assignment. So we're opening with focusing on the adolescent age group and their use of ChatGPT, and I want to primarily focus on how it's replacing and commodifying the learning skills of thinking and making decisions for themselves. And one of the examples that I noted was a TikTok that I saw probably near the end of last spring semester. It might have even been like a whole year ago, but it was a TikTok of this college student at graduation, and he had his laptop with him for some reason, and he was showing whoever was recording. He was showing his laptop and scrolling through his final paper, and he was hooping and hollering about how ChatGPT wrote his final paper for him and helped him graduate. And that was a very strange thing to see at the time. And obviously, with news and social media, there is just as much criticism around AI and ChatGPT as there is the push for normalizing it. And when I saw that TikTok, it reconfirmed my criticisms and the criticisms that I've seen of generative AI, especially with ChatGPT, because they had a computer write a final paper for them in a school setting that prioritizes critical thinking and developing and using that skill. So commodifying a computer to do that for you doesn't really instill any of those lessons in your brain for you to use later on in life. And that does kind of segue into the topic breakdowns I want to discuss. So the title for this video, hopefully I keep it, but I plan to make the title of this YouTube video, ChatGPT is brainwashing your children, in like all caps. And the reason for that is partially because of what I just mentioned, and then there are a couple studies that I've seen online and have looked into from like the APA, the American Psychology Association. I believe that's what it's called. But there have been a couple studies and brain scans observing the difference in using ChatGPT and AI generative machines long term in young adults and adolescents. And it has been shown that with prolonged use of ChatGPT and utilizing that in place of working out the parts of your brain that conduct critical thinking and problem solving issues, they have found less electric I think it's electric activity happening in your brain in those areas because they're not being used. And typically that is also seen in brain scans of people with depression or depression like clinically or even symptomatically, in case they do have other mental illnesses. Typically those parts of the brains are a lot less active in the long term because they're just not being used, because chemicals aren't being activated, synapses aren't being activated, and so they just like turn off. And this is in part of why I critiqued the video of the university student flexing that he used ChatGPT to write his paper, because he was very confident in the fact that he used a ChatGPT machine to do his paper for him. And in psychology, this can just be seen as overconfidence bias and confirmation bias towards ChatGPT. And typically, when overconfidence and confirmation bias are, internalized, it usually leads those same individuals to underperform outside of school environments, or also segueing into cultivation theory, where there is a method of exposure of similar information over and over again to where the viewer or consumer kind of just concludes it to be true, and therefore they start to share these false claims with others as truth, and this in turn normalizes the rhetoric instead of any of those people doing the independent research to debate these claims and find the information to back them up, because at the end of it, they haven't been instilling and internalizing critical thinking skills because they have ChatGPT doing it for them. I pulled a section off of this LibreText.org site for this assignment on cultivation theory, and it states that viewers of TV specifically, in this case, identify with certain values and identities that are presented as mainstream on television, even though they do not actually share those values or identities in their real lives. And this can be applied to modern social media platforms, in that today's fast-paced influencer culture can easily convince adolescents that using newer technologies like ChatGPT is normal, therefore ethical and moral. Especially with influencers online, their job is solely to influence people to buy certain products or install certain platforms, social media apps, softwares, what have you. They have advertisement deals for practically anything these days. And if adolescents are seeing influencers use ChatGPT to commodify their lives further, then they're gonna assume and believe that using ChatGPT for things past information consolidation is normal. And with ads, advertisements in general are further normalizing the use of ChatGPT for everyday tasks, like grocery shopping. We've seen in social media how people are using ChatGPT to generate grocery shopping lists for themselves. And this is just another small example of how people even outside of school environments are using ChatGPT to further commodify their lives and do less thinking on the everyday basis. And the advertisements are only furthering this into people's everyday lives. And I pulled this info from the More Perfect Union article on X, and I'll attach the link in the description. But this goes back to when public schools started transitioning into more digitized schoolwork, like back when, Canvas, and I believe in my high school and middle school we had Schoology. So most of our classwork ended up being digitalized, and instead of paperwork, and big tech like Google saw this and wanted to expand on it and profit off of it. Therefore, they started campaigning to send in those smart boards and specifically Chromebooks to lower income students in lower income public school districts. And this did not improve the lower test score ratings. It in fact made them lower, and now we're seeing even lower scores in the era of ChatGPT and the generative AI capabilities of just generating unverified information to fit whatever questions and narratives you, the student, feed it to answer. And obviously, this is an issue because it is directly connected to, unfortunately, the normalized habit of giving young adults and teenagers and children technology with unlimited access and unsupervised tech use. And this was seen in school, outside of school, with children having access to these Chromebooks, and teachers having a 1 to 32 teacher to student ratio. It's physically incapable to monitor all of these teenagers and making sure that they're on the right websites and doing their schoolwork the entire period. Outside of that, the issues of unsupervised tech in hand with this rise in use of ChatGPT for things outside of its scholarly intentions of generating information and consolidating information that you give it. These two issues can be passively and subconsciously consumed by the adolescent. I'm talking about misinformation or false information, rhetoric, all that. These two issues can be passively and subconsciously consumed by the adolescent while they're scrolling and engaging with the preferred social media platforms, being accepted as at face value and internalized without second thoughts. And consuming media like this can usually create a trust and reliance in social media algorithms that are inherently created to maintain user engagement for profit, which is inherently motivated the normalization of usage with artificial intelligence in the mainstream generative models like OpenAI's ChatGPT. And this is a problem because, like I said for this whole video, ChatGPT is only an algorithm that automates a generalized response to the prompts you give it, and this technology should not be relied upon past the original use of consolidating and organizing given information and data. And excuse me. To back this up a little bit, and it is on a harsher note, we've seen on the news in the past couple months where there have been a few adolescents who died by suicide who have been allegedly motivated by their conversations with ChatGPT. And this can be due to the inconsistencies in the responses from ChatGPT and also the extremely faulty security barriers that are within the software of ChatGPT. And I pulled an NPR article. Let me open it up here. Okay, and then from this NPR article, I found that 72% of teenagers, so adolescents between the age of like 13 and 18, have used AI companions at least once, with more than half using them a few times a month. And another more recent study by a digital company called Aura found that nearly 1 in 3 teenagers use AI chatbots and their platforms for social interactions and relationships, including role playing, friendships, sexual and romantic relationships. The Aura study found that sexual or romantic role play is 3 times as common as using platforms for homework help. Um, and this expands on my point that ChatGPT is brainwashing these children, these teenagers, because it's attempting to replace things that cannot be replaced physiologically. Um, it may be easy and a commodity to um, give an answer and receive a response to a robot about really, really simple conversations, but to get a consistent and emotional connection with a robot is just not a thing, and it's never going to be a thing. And the push for the idea that it can be possible has clearly been harmful and detrimental to families and adolescents that have used it. And this leads me to discussing further regulation in not just the AI industry, but also just the internet in general. In the United States, our laws are severely lacking in any regulations in the internet space. You can see this in all of the many child trafficking and exploitation stories that we see online, and the continued news breakouts of all of these perpetrators of providing and sharing and creating CSAM, and not much has been done about it because there's not much regulation about it. And going back to this NPR article that I pulled about these couple of teens who died by suicide and motivated allegedly by ChatGPT, because I believe the cases are still ongoing. And I believe this is quoted from a lawyer involved in one of these cases. A few months after Adam's death, OpenAI said on its website that if someone expresses suicidal intent, ChatGPT is trained to direct people to seek professional help. And in the U.S., ChatGPT refers people to the 988 suicide and crisis hotline. But Adam Rain's or the mother of Adam Rain's testimony says that did not happen in Adam's case. OpenAI spokesperson Kate Waters says that the company prioritizes teen safety. Quote, "We are building towards an age prediction system to understand whether someone is over or under 18 so their experience can be tailored appropriately. And when we are unsure of a user's age, we'll automatically default that user to the teen experience." Waters wrote in an email statement to NPR, "We're also rolling out new parental controls guided by expert input by the end of the month so families can decide what works best in their homes." And this raises a issue in that these implementations should have been a part of the software from the jump and should have been in the coding from the jump. It shouldn't have taken a couple deaths by suicide of these teenagers for OpenAI to finally try to improve the security barriers within ChatGPT. And just to expand on that, adolescents are particularly vulnerable to the risks of these virtual relationships with chatbots. And this is according to Mitch Prinstein, Chief of Psychology, Strategy, and Integration at the American Psychological Association, who also testified at this hearing for Adam Rain. This is a teenager who did die by suicide and had reported dozens of conversations with ChatGPT where he idealized and planned and discussed methods to successfully commit suicide. And ChatGPT went as far as suggesting to contact 988 at some points, where, and this is where Adam Rain would easily surpass these messages and reprogram the chatbot into circling back to the conversation of discussing suicide and planning his methods. And so Mitch Pristine did testify at the hearing of Adam Rain's parents suing OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, and they Mitch Prinstein later did put out a health advisory about AI in teens, and it specifically urged AI companies to build guardrails for their platforms to protect adolescents. And he's quoted stating, "Brain development across puberty creates a period of hypersensitivity to positive social feedback, while teens are still unable to stop themselves from staying online longer than they should." And continuing, AI exploits this neural vulnerability with chatbots that can be obsequious, deceptive, factually inaccurate, yet disproportionately powerful for teens. And he says this to the lawmakers during the testimony. More and more adolescents are interacting with chatbots, depriving them of opportunities to learn critical interpersonal skills, and end quote. And he is later noted saying that we need practice with minor conflicts and misunderstandings to learn empathy, compromise, and resilience. And that's end quote. And I did want to tie that back into my example of the university student boasting about using ChatGPT for his final projects for his college graduating. Sorry. Because it doesn't just stop with um, learning empathy, compromise, and resilience as um, growing skills in a person, at the root of it does affect an individual's ability to think critically and apply critical thinking to um, outside influences and the ability to better determine what is real, what isn't, what is healthy, what isn't. And yeah, there is just a huge dichotomy between people who are promoting ChatGPT as this ethical new technology that can be used and applied to anything in life, and the polar opposite of criticizing the overuse and normalization of ChatGPT past its original purpose. I've recorded for half an hour. At the end of the day, we're social animals. The point of bringing ChatGPT up and its effects towards adolescents specifically is to just reaffirm that at the end of the day, we are social animals that need physical interactions with other social animals to fulfill real psychological and physiological needs that technology will never replace. And technology can and should only be involved in those needs in the way that language barriers can be in the way. Because other than that, technology and language models have been used to just further accommodate people with disabilities, people with mutism, people with speech impediments, and those are all within their own limits. They are not being used to further commodify the individual's needs or wants or supplementing other aspects of its life, socially, interpersonally, holistically, any of that. And I know I'm not bringing anything new to the table in discussing ChatGPT. Again, this is just an assignment for school. But I hope that I did contribute a little bit of organizing to the collective discourse around the effects of generative AI when it's used improperly. And I really do hope that we do see some more regulation overall in the tech space. And it does have to start. It does have to start with the internet, and then it does have to hit AI models next because they work hand in hand, and they are both being exploited at about the same rate. So I hope I hope this video was somewhat concise. I hope that somebody got something out of it and opened up a conversation, or maybe learned something further. But yeah, that was my first podcast episode. Thanks, guys.